Think you're addicted to dopamine because a thing you're likely addicted to, social media, told you that. Well, think again, because you're not addicted to the chemical itself, nor even the reward. It's the chase that never ends, and the endless cycles of desire that keep us stuck like hamsters on a wheel. So let's explore the brain on addiction. Social media's exploitation of this as just one example. The hedonic treadmill, the myth of Sisyphus, the wisdom of presence versus the desires of the future, and what it is you're really unconsciously seeking in the first place. So welcome to Philosophy of Everything. I'm Susan, and thanks so much for being here. So let's start by taking a look at the so-called dopamine addiction. And importantly, even when we look at it from an addiction perspective, so perhaps a more extreme perspective, the same understanding goes for softer cravings and compulsions in which we all have. And they are the cycles of desire that trap us. So dopamine is not actually a pleasure chemical. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter, and it is responsible for two things that drive us: anticipation and motivation. So as you can see, anticipation and motivation on their own are not bad things. I mean, they're not necessarily inherently good either, but they can certainly be used towards good things. As is always the case, it's up to us in which direction they are applied. But we are not addicted to the actual thing we always think we're addicted to. What I mean by that is it's not necessarily the reward. So what happens is we get addicted to the chase. So the chase is consisting of triggers, behaviors, cues, rituals, actions. And at the end of this chase is the supposed reward, or the hit of sorts. And when the reward doesn't live up to the height of the anticipation, or doesn't satisfy the real unconscious desire in the first place, we're left unsatisfied. And this is what causes us to create a cycle, because then our brain wants to go right back to the beginning of the chase in the first place. So we keep looping back in what is now the cycle of addiction or the cycle of desire, because the chase is what we're addicted to, and the reward at the end of it is never quite fully satisfying. So in the context of social media, so just give it an easy addiction that we can all relate to, social media exploits this process in our brain. And importantly, our brain's plasticity reinforces these bad habits quite easily and quite quickly. So in my Fate or Free Will episode, I mentioned neuroplasticity, and I highlighted there how neuroplasticity is happening all the time. Our brain's ability to rewire and repattern is always happening. So neuroplasticity is only something that is helpful or that is productive if we consciously or intentionally apply it to something more productive. Otherwise, we have the ability to reinforce bad habits all the time. And social media, like I said, exploits this. So social media platforms have features like infinite scrolling, personalized recommendations, a series of varied as well as unpredictable rewards. So a combination of knowing there's going to be likes, comments, and or new posts, but not knowing how many or what specifically they're going to be or where they're going to be from. So that sense of varied rewards and knowing that there's going to be rewards, but there's a bit of unpredictability to it, really reinforces that anticipation, that motivation. So again, the dopamine, which is released during that chase. But then at the end of this action, so at the end of using social media, there's really no satisfying reward. So our brain goes right back to the beginning of that cycle, right back to the chase. So there is importantly an unconscious desire that's triggering all of this. And as much as we would probably like to solely blame social media, it's our brains, and we have the ability to be consciously aware of where we are directing and putting our energy. So it's not just social media, it is a combination of social media and us being unconsciously driven in our day-to-day actions. So what is the source of your social media addiction? And if you don't resonate with the social media addiction, substitute this question for whatever your compulsion is, because we all have them. And at the source of each of them is a desire or is an impulse at the unconscious level. And when I say unconscious, to put this into practical terms, Most of our sensory and neural activity is indeed unconscious, so it's not happening at the levels of the conscious or cognitive mind. It is a great deal of what arises through our body and through our environment as sensory input and information. And this is what I referenced as the readiness potential as an example in my Fate or Free Will episode. So again, the activity in the brain of an impulse or desire before our conscious awareness of said impulse or desire. So our brain is constantly flooded with this input, with this information, with this data. And again, as I referenced in my Fate or Free Will episode, it is your will. Your will is the capacity to organize, self-organize all of that input into a single conscious action, a single conscious act of will in each and every present moment. And when you are not doing that consciously, you lack will. Or in a spiritual context, you are lacking soul. Which is why the less willpower we have, or the more we become addicted to something outside of us, the more soul we lose. We lose that connection. But the practical understanding of that is we lose the ability to harmonize all of that input into a single conscious act of will in each present moment. So every addiction and compulsion is not just about the surface behavior or the dopamine-driven chase. It's often an unconscious attempt to fill an inner void, or an unconscious attempt to regulate a dysregulated state, or an unconscious attempt to satisfy an unconscious desire impulse that has not been made conscious just yet. And when we are not conscious of it, we are not able to satisfy it correctly, and hence that feedback loop that creates the cycle of addiction or cycle of desire in the first place. The brain tries to manage stress, anxiety, loneliness, grief, fear, unresolved trauma, or even just a single feeling that is so overwhelming by regulating for us. So if we are not consciously regulating ourselves, and or if we are not consciously choosing our acts of will, our body and our mind will do it for us unconsciously. So many of these cycles of desires we get stuck in are actually unconscious means of regulation. And again, unconscious means to fill a void or satisfy a desire that we are ignoring. So to tie this back into the social media example, an unconscious desire at the root of that addiction for so many of us, one that I think we can all relate to, is a very deep, authentic desire for connection. Because that desire for connection is such a meaningful part of the human experience. And there is an illusion of connection with social media, or even with your phone, with the internet. But it is just that. It is just an illusion. And the more we chase it, the less social connections we're actually able to have. It's a paradox. So there is a psychological concept called the Hedonic Treadmill. And this explains why we never feel enough. And it reveals an interesting paradox. So no matter what we gain or lose, humans tend to return to a baseline of sorts of happiness. And the brain's reward system adapts over time. So for example, even though dopamine spikes with novelty, so the first time you do something or a sense of newness to anything, whether it's social media or meeting people new that for dating, there is a dopamine spike with that, but it fades. And any pleasure also fades over time because it becomes routine. So this leaves us chasing bigger and better hits endlessly. The paradox is that the more we get, the more we want. Yet our lasting happiness doesn't increase. The hedonic treadmill reminds us that that baseline of happiness that we always return to is actually the same. And when we get stuck on this cycle, whether it's this desire for something new, the desire for more pleasure, the desire to satisfy something unconscious that we have not acknowledged yet, it feels like progress. There is an illusion of progress, of perhaps an illusion of evolving. But the treadmill keeps us running in place. We are not actually getting anywhere. The more we get, the more we want. We remain just simply restless and unsatisfied. In my morality episode, of Collapse and Morality episode, I referenced the real point of gratitude, and it's our negativity bias. Our brain is able to record negative experiences immediately. We do it by default out of survival purposes. But when it comes to positive experiences, when it comes to experiences of joy, experiences of pleasure that are right in front of you, we have to hold them in our conscious awareness longer and or with intent for them to be recorded the same way as negative ones. So this is why something like gratitude, whether it is formal and written down or something you just bring into your awareness consciously for a minute, it is how we can reinforce more positive feedback loops as opposed to the negative ones. Because the bittersweet reality is the only thing you will find at the end of your chase is what you brought with you there. So are you bringing with you a sense of needing something else, of needing something new, of needing something more, of not having enough and needing to do something or want something? Because if that's what you bring with you there, that is what you will find when you get there. We're not really chasing things outside of us. We are chasing feelings inside of us. Again, the unconscious impulses that we are ignoring. So speaking of the unconscious again, let's now talk about the myth of Sisyphus. This is a myth from the ancient Greeks, but it was made famous in more modern times by Albert Camus. And he used this myth as a metaphor for the absurdity of the human experience. But I want to use this myth for different purposes today, so to use it for a different metaphor. So in this myth, Sisyphus is condemned by the gods, so he's punished by the gods, as the myths go, to roll a boulder up a hill. He rolls it up the hill, and then the boulder falls down the hill, and he has to do it all over again. So he just endlessly rolls this boulder up the hill, not actually going or getting anywhere. So ideally, you can see right away how this presents a clear mirror or metaphor for the hedonic treadmill itself. The boulder is our cravings, our desires that we think are outside of us, that we think are something physical or material. And the push up the hill is the endless chase for a fleeting high, for a sense of novelty, for a reward that will never fully satisfy. Now, in this myth, just like many of the ancient myths, Sisyphus is punished by the gods, and this is why he's stuck in this cycle. And there's an important understanding here that has been lost to modern times. The gods are archetypes. The archetypes are premortal energies that are at the root of describing all attributes, that are describing all things and all experiences. They are the transpersonal forces that are at the root of all things. So to say otherwise, and to tie this back into a comment from earlier, the gods represent those unconscious forces that are actually at the root of our impulses and desires at an unconscious level. Remember that most of our sensory experience, so information and data, neural activity that's flooding our brain at all times, is from these unconscious forces, both from our body but also from our environment, the transpersonal forces, aka the gods. So in this myth, just like the many other ancient myths, Sisyphus is not punished by some separate mysterious entity. He is a slave to his own unconscious, or to the larger unconscious forces at large. Until you make those impulses and those desires conscious, the true ones, the authentic ones, the ones that will feel like they give you meaning because they are part of the wisdom of your story, the wisdom and intelligence in your seed, until you make them conscious, they will be unconsciously trying to satisfy themselves, and you will be left feeling very unsatisfied, thinking that the answer is something outside of you, like a physical boulder. There is an important paradox here, and that is the more you are seeking the external reward, the less you are able to reach the internal reward. And it is the internal reward that is the internal feeling that you are actually seeking. Otherwise, you are endlessly chasing your own tail outside of you, trying to find something that will never fully satisfy you and will instead keep you in a cycle of endless desire, the chase that never ends. So to put that paradox into context, we'll use the social media addiction example from earlier. So the parts of the brain that drive motivation and the anticipation of reward, so that dopamine addiction cycle, remember, is distinct from the parts of the brain that actually support connection. So the parts of the brain that actually support connection, social engagement, curiosity, open-mindedness, emotional regulation, and all of those things are needed for connection are connected to the social engagement networks of the brain. So the prefrontal cortex, the vagus nerve pathways, etc. And those are very distinct from the anticipation and motivation of reward systems. So when we're stuck in addictive or compulsive cycles or endless cycles of craving and desire and chasing, the brain can become dominated by those systems, leading to heightened craving and a narrowed focus on immediate gratification. So less will, less soul, and less capability of tapping into the parts of the brain that actually lead you to connection in the first place. The more you're addicted to social media, the less connection you will derive out of it. The antidote to all of this, if you can't tell, is presence. Simply presence. Because if we can be present, we are not bound to this obsession for future rewards, which are something outside of us and something, again, in some hypothetical future that never really exists. Your life is a series of present moments. What you find in the future is what you brought there, because once you've experienced the future is when the future becomes present. Enhancing present moment awareness reduces your fixation on future rewards and allows an appreciation of current experiences. So it's that appreciation that you bring with you on your journey. It's that appreciation that you are able to feed and thus grow. We want to shift from craving to awareness, and we want to shift from wanting to being. Instead of wanting something, what can you be right now to get there? Instead of just craving things, can you be consciously aware of what the underlying impulse or desire or feeling really is? Or again, you will be stuck chasing your own tail. Thank you so much. Take care, and I'll see you next time. And I always forget to say this, but please like, share, subscribe, all the things that I'm supposed to say. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.